You know, the people who are on the television show The View, they cosplay as a lot of things. They cosplay as concerned voters. And I say cosplay because concerned voters would take some time to actually think in depth about the stuff that they're going to vote on. They would, look at source material and not just watch clips, but actually go read legislation, and they'd look at voter ratings from an array of associations on things like liberty or property rights or gun rights, or if you're on the left, abortion access, etc. But the ladies in The View cosplay as concerned voters. And they're really just going across the surface of stuff, what Rush Limbaugh, God rest him, used to call the drive-by media. They just drive by, look at it, make this decision, Republican bad, Democrat good, there you go, there's your story. And I've been watching with incredible amazement as some lesser view-type people in local media are obsessed with the construction project at the White House. They're not obsessed with construction projects elsewhere with government money. They're not obsessed with the wasting of money on things like, for instance, do you remember the $1 billion to have all the electric car charging stations and then there were none of them? Do you remember that? Do you remember the billions of dollars to bring rural internet access to rural areas and then there was zero internet access? Do you remember some of the tearing apart of people's private property during the Black Lives Matter Incorporated protests that were so mostly peaceful, as they were mostly peacefully burning down people's buildings and destroying sometimes their homes and their cars? In the case of Seattle, 80 Asian businesses were destroyed. Some of their buildings utterly obliterated from the inside. Some of them burned from the inside. Media didn't like talking about that stuff. No concern. Now, I get it. The White House is iconic. I get that as well. But when The View starts to cosplay as philosophers, we're reaching a pretty weird level of discourse. And when it's this easy for President Trump's war room to respond to Gavin Newsom's people, we're also entering into a pretty pathetic world of trying to hit President Trump. Here's what Gavin Newsom's team wrote on Twitter: ripping apart the White House just like he's ripping apart the Constitution. Burn, sick, burn. So sick. And then Trump war room responds: your Capitol renovation is costing California taxpayers $1.1 billion, 4 times more than the privately funded White House ballroom, which cost taxpayers nothing. Now, maybe it cost taxpayers nothing. Maybe. Because I don't think donors come along and do things without expecting a return. I'm not that silly. They expect access at least. And if you look at the map of this, and it's changed now because apparently in order to do this the right way, the whole East Wing is going to have to be taken down. And I'm sorry, even as a guy who's a fan of the president's policies, most of them, this is an uncomfortable look during the time of a government shutdown, but it's not unprecedented that this would happen in a construction project. President Trump loves construction projects, but the intent of this was to take the East Wing. And the best way to describe this would be, let's say you have a guest house, a great big guest house that you've turned into offices. So maybe home offices, and you've got some staff there. And the intent was to redo the sunroom. And it's a long sunroom, and I'm saying just proportionally. Now the East Wing's going to have to be taken apart and replaced. And again, it's unprecedented, and no one's ever seen anything like it. And of course, you know about the building projects on the inside. You know about the swimming pools and the bowling alleys and the basketball courts and in fact, the creation of the West Wing itself, right? We know about these things. But we also know that when The View is going to go out and cosplay to philosophers, we've reached a really weird level. And I'll tell you what I mean in a second. There's some cosplaying going on right now in the United States on the topic of stem cells. You know, when I tell people I go to Mexico, Renew Healthcare for stem cell therapy, did it first for my shoulder after surgery, and it recovered, about 4,000 times faster than my left shoulder without stem cells. Same surgery, by the way. Got my push-ups and pull-ups back in 11 weeks on my right arm, 48 weeks on my left. My left arm still doesn't work the right way. And it's not just limited to that. There are people who have suffered from ED. Guy is a doctor, and he'd suffered from ED after prostate cancer for a couple decades. He was blown away on a call. I was there with Renew when he learned how they do this. It brings that part of the body back to life. They can do this with hair follicles. They can do it to reset immune systems. But there's this cosplay going on in the United States where people say, oh, we do that here. No, you don't. At Renew, they use donor stem cells from women they get to know. They pay for their birth. They monitor the health of the woman and the baby during pregnancy and afterwards. They take the placenta and the umbilical cords. That's what they use, is use umbilical cords into a lab, and they analyze them immediately. They reject 80% of the cells because they're not potent enough or they're not safe enough. And then the 20% they keep, they culture so there's more of them. And that's just the very beginning. In the United States, you're getting stem cells from whoever, with whatever health condition, shipped around the country however many times, frozen for however long. At Renew, before they inject you, they check the potency of the cells again. It's renew.healthcare, whether it's ED, it's not wanting to go through surgery, want to recover better, can't use your hands, things like that, or male pattern baldness, even female pattern baldness. Go to renew.healthcare, RENUE.healthcare. So here's the view. And they're cosplaying as philosophers here, talking about nihilism.
Imagine how far $250 million could go for families who can't put food on their table.
Right?
Like it's just...
That's what struck me. It's a $250 million project. It's going to be tacky and gaudy. You know that.
And people are losing their health care.
And they're losing their health
to
care.
give tax breaks to multimillionaires.
And to billionaires who probably are some of the private donors for this tacky, gaudy, nasty ballroom. And the thing that you said, Whoopi, was the first thing that came to mind. It's tacky. See? I mean, and the thing...
It looks like a casino ball.
It looks like Mar-a-Lago. It looks like Mar-a-Lago, which is tacky.
They went on to refer to this as nihilism. They discussed this as nihilism. Oh, what's that mean? Look it up. A nihilist is a person who accepts or champions the philosophy of nihilism, which is the belief that life lacks objective meaning, purpose, or intrinsic value. It's a construction project on which human beings are working on a building that he doesn't get to keep. This is nihilism? Or nihilist, if you like. May also refer to an absolute skeptic who believes in the truth of nothing. Men or women? Existential nihilism, the belief that life is without meaning, purpose, or value. Does that sound like the guy who put the most pro-life Supreme Court together that was responsible for finally undoing the constitutional perversion of Roe versus Wade? Moral nihilism, the rejection of morality, holding that moral values and obligations are baseless. Does that sound like the guy who created executive orders to once again make sure that men don't get to go steal women's trophies? Does that sound like that guy? Or the guy who's trying to protect America from violent cartel-aligned narco-terrorists? Does that sound like that guy? Or does that sound like a party that says abortion at all costs, at all times? A party that embraces medical ethicists who say, you know what? If a child can't care for themselves and can't yet get their own food or water, a parent should be able to starve them of water and food. After all, they're just useless eaters. They embrace that. And you can continue through this. And you could look all the way through the Democrat Party and find anything that's not this way in regard to lack of respect for life. So they're cosplaying. Josh Hawley got asked a question about all this and about the construction project. And look, I admit, suddenly having the East Wing now having to be taken apart, that is not a good look. And there are plenty of shiny-shoed Republicans who are running from this. But they could do things like this. Oh, hey, you're interested in infrastructure? Let's talk about the light rail in California. Do you remember that project? Multi-billions of dollars, and they have never completed it. It never will be completed. It was high-speed rail. Do you remember this? They took hundreds of billions of dollars to build something like this that was going to take people from the Bay Area to Los Angeles. And track the features here. It would take longer than an airplane. There'd be fewer trains that run. And it would cost more. But they still wanted to build this high-speed rail. It's never going to be completed. They've had to abandon the project because they cannot get it done. That was after they changed the speed so it would no longer be high speed, so it would take an even longer time to fly. There are $39 flights from the Bay Area to Los Angeles, probably 15 times a day, and sometimes they're $15 if you wait to the last minute to travel. But no, we have to have this. Suddenly you're interested in infrastructure. What about the infrastructure, as I said, of the car charging stations that never happened? What about the infrastructure of figurehead Biden, who, when he had our Navy go build a pier in Gaza, do you remember this? Number one, our ship broke down. A U.S. Navy ship broke down because it was ill repaired. Number two, they put up this dock so they could unload materials to bring aid into Gaza, and the dock sank about a week after it went up. You're interested in infrastructure now? Suddenly you have questions about infrastructure? Suddenly this matters to you? Shiny-shoed Republicans are never available to respond this way to when the media comes out. In this case, the girls at The View, the women, want to play philosopher. Josh Hawley had a locked answer. So Hawley must have thought this out, or maybe he's just this quick. But he's walking through the halls of the Senate, and up comes a reporter to ask him this question. Now, listen to the way Josh Hawley deals with this. This is perfect because it goes to one of the strengths of President Trump, and that is the culture wars, so-called. President Trump is winning the culture wars. He's destroying the left on the culture wars, and praise God, because President Trump's position on the culture wars align far more with God than the Democrat Party, who can't find a policy on which they agree with God. Here's Hawley.
What about just uprooting this is an iconic building?
Mono, I will just say this. I made this point yesterday, that I hear all of a sudden from my liberal friends that they're very concerned about our history. Really, these are the same people who tore down every statue they could get their hands on in the last 4 years. Christopher Columbus, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt. They didn't have any concern for history then. Now all of a sudden, they're like, the facade of the East Wing is iconic. Oh, give me a break. Give me a break.
It's a perfect answer because it takes the fight back to areas where the president is winning. He's winning on the culture front, so why? Is it because he's the best communicator ever? Maybe. Or maybe this. On the topic of abortion, he is far closer to God. He doesn't like abortion. He changed on that front. He's tried to make sure it's impossible to get. Not succeeding, because many states are still allowing it, but the president did his job there. On the topic of God created us male and female. Male and female, he created us in his image, he created us. President Trump is far closer to God. In terms of religious liberty, President Trump is far closer to God. The Democrats wanted to stomp that out altogether. And in terms of respect for life, I think the very fact that the president is doing everything he can to bring manufacturing jobs back and energy dominance back here, you could say that's all about business. But then again, a nation's economy is tied to a nation's mental health. And President Trump is far closer to God on all those fronts than the Democrat Party.